Hi everybody. No one's logged in yet, so we'll just give it a second. But today we have Hot Dog Blaze. There he is.
Oh.
What? You okay?
Yeah.
Did you lose your mustard?
No.
No?
It's
Okay.
right here.
Cool. Do you like hot dogs?
Yeah.
Yeah? What's your favorite kind of hot dog?
Plain.
Plain hot dog. Okay. So, Blaze, do you have any good cookie jokes?
Yeah.
What do you got?
What's the monkey's favorite cookie?
What is the monkey's favorite cookie? I have no idea. What is the monkey's favorite cookie?
Chocolate chimp.
Oh, chocolate chimp cookie. Oh my goodness. Did you just come up with that?
No.
No. Okay. Well, today we're making chocolate chip cookies, probably the most popular cookie in the entire world. Super delicious, super great. There's nothing to complain about with a chocolate chip cookie. The biggest complaint I hear as I make them is more chocolate chip cookies. That's all anybody ever tells me. They never tell me they're bad. They never tell me they're great. They just say, you know, I'd eat more of those. But today we're going to make my version of them. For those of you who do not know, tomorrow is my birthday. And I'm not saying that because I need a whole bunch of happy birthday or whatever, but I'm telling you because there's a tradition in our house where my wife, as sweet and loving as she is we lost the TV, she makes me a giant cookie cake every year, and she uses the Nestle Toll House recipe, which is fine, but it is also, you know, it's the Nestle Toll House recipe, and I'm kind of a snob about food, right? So I love it because of tradition, but it is not my chocolate chip cookie recipe, so we're gonna make my chocolate chip cookie recipe today. Now, if you've been with us all week, which I hope you have, and I hope you're with us for the future, and I hope it's super great and everybody loves it, we have covered the biscuit method where we made biscuits. We have covered the muffin method where we made muffins. Today we're making chocolate chip cookies. There is no cookie method, but we will be using what's called the creaming method. This is probably the most common pastry method that there is. It's used for most cookies, a lot of cakes, a whole bunch of other pastries. We use it in some breads sometimes, so this is the one you're probably the most familiar with. However, things that I have seen and heard from people is they have troubles with the creaming process because they don't know how to fully or properly cream the ingredients together. They don't know when to stop, they don't know when to keep going, etc., etc. So today, we're going to cover the creaming process. In that, we will cream our fat with our sugars. That is the start. And because I like to kind of streamline all of my recipes to make less steps overall, I will cream the fat with the sugars and the leavening and the salt right off the bat. That way it all incorporates the most evenly that it can. I have yet to find an issue with doing it this way, so I keep doing it that way. To me, the less steps, the better, because I'm always in a rush. I always need to go faster. Hot Dog Blaze, do you like chocolate chip cookies?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
Do you want to make some today? All right, here we go.
And before we do, let's go over the rules.
Let's go over the rules. Okay, Hot Dog Blaze, what are the rules?
So the ages to cook right now is 5 through 35, since tomorrow is Joda Baker's birthday, which is pretty exciting. Her instructions is use a mitten when we put our hand in the oven. 2, be clean. 3, you have to be organized and make it your own, you know, like swoop it up or something.
Swoop it up? What is swoop it up? Oh, swap some ingredients?
Yeah.
Yeah, we made a list before this. Hot Dog Blaze wanted to incorporate his rules for success in the kitchen. So, we're going to start at the top. Use a mitten when handling hot items or reaching into the oven. That's great, but I can tell you as a professional, we never do that. We use towels. Earlier, I was reaching in the oven and grabbed something and my towel moved and I burned my hand. I do it probably 30 or 40% of the time, so I'm used to it. But Hot Dog Blaze is right. Practice safety. Nobody needs to get any severe burns when they're trying to enjoy super delicious chocolate chip cookies. Rule number 2, be clean. Were you super clean yesterday?
No.
Not really. There was streusel everywhere. We were picking streusel up off the floor. We were stepping on it. It happens. That's cooking with kids. But be clean. Along with that, be organized. It's nice when everything is scaled right here, easy to grab and easy to use. The few comments that I've gotten from people are, yeah, your recipes are super fast. It honestly takes the longest to scale the ingredients. That is super true. That is what kills most chefs when it comes to competition cooking, cooking on television and things like that, is scaling takes time. And of course you don't want to mess this up because we can't really fix it later. And then make it your own. We can talk about swapping some ingredients, which we've been doing. Chocolate chip cookies are pretty standard, but there are ways to make it more tailored if you want to go that route. So, excellent rules. Fist bump.
Wait, the last one, we need to make sure to share.
Share? What if I don't want to share my chocolate chip cookies?
Then you would break the rule.
I would break the rules? Okay. Then I guess we won't break the rules. Do we have to only share with people we like?
No.
No, because if we share chocolate chip cookies, they might like us even more, right? Okay, so let's jump into the recipe. Thank you, Hot Dog Blaze.
And if we do something, then we don't give up and we don't throw it in the trash.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but sometimes you do have to throw some food in the trash. I've been there a couple times, and I think we will all be there in the future. But let's jump right in. So our fat today is butter. We will use soft butter. It's very important that it is soft. It is 3/4 of a cup, which I'm doing this because I love you guys. I hate volume so much. It is 3/4 of a cup, or roughly 140 grams. Then we have 95-ish grams of brown sugar. The volume on that is a 1/2 cup. Then we have white sugar. This is another 1/2 cup, but it will weigh about 105 grams because it is much finer. Right? Now, you see that I've blended the sugars together. I have brown sugar and white sugar. If you wanted to start tailoring this recipe already, you could make it all brown sugar or all white sugar or all sugar substitute. That is totally fine. Do whatever you prefer. The more brown sugar and the darker the brown sugar you use, the softer your cookies will become over time. They will be crispier immediately upon baking because all of the extra sugars will condense and create kind of a little shard of sugar rim on it, which is great. But over time, those have molasses in them, and molasses is what we consider hygroscopic. It will absorb moisture from the air as it sits, so these cookies that were super crisp and delicious on day 1 will end up being very, very soft and chewy on day 3 or 4. So just keep that in mind if that's what you're going for. Cook them now, enjoy them later, right? Now I told you, I also like to go ahead and throw in my baking soda. We have a 1/2 teaspoon or roughly 3 grams of baking soda. What you should notice right away is that is a very, very small amount of baking soda. Truth be told, we don't need leavening to make these cookies. And the reason that we use baking soda, by and large, is to add a slightly acidic flavor and to enhance the color of our chocolate chip cookies. You can make these cookies without leavening. It's completely fine. We're not worried about getting much lift out of them because they cook so fast. And honestly, traditionally, cookies are relatively flat compared to something like a muffin or a cake, right? So, and then we have our salt. Salt, salt, salt. Super important with chocolate chip cookies. Today we're talking about 6 grams or roughly a teaspoon. Now the type of salt you use is completely up to you. I'm a big, big fan of flaked sea salt. I find that it breaks down a little slower. It has a much more robust flavor in the final product. If you have kosher salt, that is fine. If you have iodized salt, go for it. I hate it just because it's kind of pedestrian. But if you have Himalayan salt, smoked sea salt, black salt, gray salt, there are so many types of salt. Go with whatever you're feeling and you'll see how it works in the end. Honestly, it's all salty. The thing that I would recommend not using is garlic salt. I would not use garlic salt in chocolate chip cookies, but if you're one of those people, shoot me a photo, let me know how it goes. Okay? So, in the bowl, sugars, leavening, salt, and fat. Again, I like you guys to think kind of in broad strokes. So, we're going to cream it together. To cream it properly, we use the paddle. The paddle is this spade-looking thing with the cross arms in the middle. Now, this one's had quite a bit of use, big surprise, but it will still work just fine. When we're creaming, it is definitely best if all the ingredients are the same temperature, and that ideal temperature is room temperature. Technically, it is between 72 degrees Fahrenheit and 78 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you're trying to live dangerously here in Texas in the middle of summer without your AC, you might want to throw it in the fridge for a while. But room temperature is a safe place to go. If you pull everything out of the fridge and it's cold because you're in a rush and in a panic, it will still work. I will just recommend creaming it for a much, much longer period of time. So to cream, we start on low speed to make sure that we don't create a giant mess. This mixer, for some reason, essentially starts on medium speed. I've asked KitchenAid, they've been like, yeah, it happens. Professional ones start with a very, very low speed, and they have what's called a delayed start. So you'll turn it on, and it'll take about a second to place. What you'll see me do here is don't be afraid to help your machine out. Your machine is honestly not very intelligent. So like if you need to lift the bowl a little bit to make sure it reaches the bottom, don't be afraid to do that. You see I'm lifting straight up, I'm not lifting to the side and creating a lot of, impact from the beater so that it is fully creaming from top to bottom as much as it can, considering it is what's called a planetary mixer. Hot Dog Blaze, stay with me, buddy. Alright, now as we cream, I told you a lot of people fear not creaming enough or perhaps over creaming. The big fear in over creaming something is that we will incorporate too much air. If we incorporate too much air into the product, what will happen is it will do what is technically called souffle. Now obviously you guys know the dish. It is something lightened with typically egg whites. It puffs up really big, super beautiful. It's barely held together because there's not enough protein for it, and it typically collapses relatively quickly. So what will happen to our cookies if we have too much air in them is they may souffle. We'll get something with a lot of rise that collapses, and then they keep spreading outward very, very quickly. This is what kind of looks like your cow pie chocolate chip cookies. Not the worst thing in the world, but not kind of my favorite style of cookie. If that's what you want, cream it, cream it, cream it, cream it, cream it all day and all night. Looks like Blaze has a fan. Can you say hi, Allie? Say hi, Allie.
Hi, Allie.
Yeah, TV works with sound, buddy. Alright? So, one of the ways we know it's creamed, it will be airy, it will be uniform, and it will be very pale in color compared to its starting color. Now, it'll be very tricky if you use all butter and all white sugar, but you will still notice it gets quite pale considerably. Now, this has been creaming for, I'm guessing, 2 to 3 minutes. At room temperature, that's probably all we need, right? Again, I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to help it mix more evenly. I'm going to turn it off. And the second most important thing about the creaming process is we need to scrape everything down often. These are planetary mixers. They only mix in the horizontal plane. They do not mix from top to bottom, right? So what we're going to do, we take our rubber spatula, we can remove the bowl, scrape everything down through the sides, and then it's really key to scoop from the bottom and flip it over to the top, right? Now, right now, the only thing that should be down there is butter, but especially once we start adding our flour and our leavenings and things like that with other recipes, we need to make sure they're incorporating properly, right? So, what do you think, Hot Dog Blaze? Look pretty good?
Yeah.
Looks like sugar and butter. What's not to like, right? Delicious. And salt. Now, what comes next is, of course, eggs, right? Today we're using approximately 60 grams of eggs, which is roughly 2 medium eggs or like 1 jumbo egg. If all you have is large eggs, you can use 1 egg, you can use 2 eggs, or you can do my favorite, 1 large egg, 1 large egg yolk. Keep reading. Now, I have Clayton saying, can you do your marshmallow recipe next Friday? Next Friday. I have to do the math in my head. We will be doing marshmallow fluff. It is very, very close to my marshmallow. My marshmallows are pretty involved, but the marshmallow fluff is a very, very good stand-in. Now, back to this. You with me, Hot Dog Blaze? We're going to add our eggs. I've added my vanilla extract to this. Vanilla extract and salt, by and large, are to taste. 6 grams of salt in this recipe is a very good starting point. I think it is a good place for everybody to land. But if you're like, no, Joe, I need way more salt, you can add it. What's up, Hot Dog Blaze?
Can I pour in the eggs?
Yes, you can pour in the eggs, but not yet, because we're still talking about vanilla extract. So the vanilla extract is to taste. Today we're using half a teaspoon or roughly 3 grams vanilla extract. It does not have to be vanilla extract. It can be vanilla paste, vanilla beans, vanilla extract, imitation vanilla extract. I have started recently experimenting with alcohol flavorings, as in the flavorings they use with alcohol companies, because I find that they are way more potent, and honestly they cost a whole lot less than the ones they market for baking. So it is something that I'm kind of testing out to see how it affects the food and how I like the final flavor. You can also not use vanilla at all if you want to. It's completely up to you. But in this container we have 1 whole large egg, 1 large egg yolk, and our 6 grams, relatively, of vanilla extract. Go ahead, dump it in there, Hot Dog Blaze. Whoa! Thank you, sir. Make sure we get it all in there. We scale our recipes for a reason. Now, we get it back on our machine. We made sure we scraped everything down. And we're going to mix this until it's complete. Now, this recipe is pretty small, so we can add all of our eggs in the beginning and we don't have to worry about it. As we scale this recipe up and up and up, obviously in professional kitchens, it's extremely rare that I would make such a small recipe. I'm typically making something closer to 1, 2, 300 cookies at a time. If you try to add too many eggs too quickly, that amount of water will separate the fat and you'll get something that disemulsifies, and you need to make sure to wait for it to re-emulsify. So, if I'm using the recipe that I've offered to you guys today, if you do anything above a 4 times recipe, you need to add the eggs in increments. Do it in halves, do it in thirds, do it in something else. What'll happen is you'll add the eggs, the recipe will splinter, and then you'll know it's ready to add more eggs when it comes back together and creates a uniform substance again. Right? It's very important. Once that membrane breaks, it takes a lot of work to put back together, and we want to make sure the cookie is ideal through the entire mixing process, because honestly, nobody likes bad cookies. We only like great cookies, right, Hot Dog Blaze? Alright. Now, I'm going to stop that. I'm happy with how it's mixed. It's lightened to pack up. It's lightened in color even more because I've added the eggs. And of course, because it's the creaming process, we're going to remove the bowl. We're going to scrape it yet again. No, we do not taste anything, right? We need to keep it all in the recipe.
No, I'm saying, like, do we have to scrape the ones that are on the bowl?
Now, we can scrape these off the paddle into the bowl, but I feel that if it's on the paddle, it's probably mixed the most uniformly than anything that's actually in the bowl. This is the part that moves. The bowl is stationary. So my theory is this is mixed better than what's in the bowl. Does that make sense?
No.
No. Well, it makes sense to me. Fist bump. Agree to disagree. All right. Now, I am going to use all-purpose flour. We've talked about how you can sub out your flours. I can tell you for chocolate chip cookies, we should only use all-purpose flour or higher in protein content. What that means is all-purpose flour or bread flour. I wouldn't even delve into the specialty flours, but if you have something like cake flour or pastry flour, what is likely to happen is you will get very, very large, very flat, very sugar-rich cookies, the types that are essentially chocolate discs with just a sugar rim around them. If that's your thing, go with a lower protein flour and you'll be fine. Snapping your fingers. Are you in a rush? Okay, so our flour today is about 1 2/3 cups or 210 grams, right? Now, the traditional theory of chocolate chip cookies is we add some of our flour, and then we add all of our chocolate, and then we add some of our flour. I say forget that, no one has time. All of our flour, and then we will also add all of our chocolate. Now today, I've taken a giant block of chocolate, which of course I get commercially, and I chopped it up. But you could use chocolate chips, which is completely fine. Blaze, why do you think there are chocolate chips? Why do you think they exist?
So if you don't want to really waste chocolate, then I think they made it so you won't really waste it in a littler way.
That's true. It reduces a lot of chocolate waste. One of the other beautiful things about chocolate chips is they are uniform in size, which means they melt uniformly. They uniformly incorporate into a recipe. I prefer the chopped chocolate because I like the little variables in my chocolate chip cookies. I like big craters of melted gooey chocolate. I like little shards of kind of overcooked chocolate that kind of achieve that almost coffee-like taste and texture. I love kind of, you know, a melange of chocolate tastes and abilities, right? So, all of our flour is in the bowl, all of our chocolate goes in the bowl. It is in equal measure to our flour or slightly higher. So for today, I'm using 1 2/3 cups chocolate chips. As we measure the weight on that, it will be slightly higher at 215 to 230 grams. Now, some of you love nuts in your cookies. Totally fine. just throw them in there. Basically as many as you want. I would keep it to as much as the chocolate chips or less. So no more than an equal amount to the chocolate chips. But if you want pecans, you want walnuts, you want almonds, macadamia nuts, whatever, you can just throw them in there. That falls into the category of what we call particulates. Particulates from the base word. What do you think the base word is?
I have no idea.
That's okay. You can have no idea. That's fair. The base word is particle. Something that takes up space, a solid, right? So the particulate in this won't change the overall baking of the recipe if it is still a solid. What I would not do is add something that melts kind of drastically or something that burns super easily. Nuts are a completely safe place. If you wanted to add some chunks of some fruits, you could. Totally fine. Could you mix your chocolates? Of course. Today I'm using dark chocolate because it's my cookie recipe. They are at 72% total cocoa mass. But because it is a cookie and they are only suspended in them, you can use any percentage of chocolate that you want. Are you happy, Hot Dog Blaze? Alright, let's mix. Now, the thing to worry about with this is all of my flour and all my chocolate's loose, so I'm going to kind of pulse my machine. Because I don't want it to kick up everywhere. Because the thing we talked about earlier was be clean, right, Hot Dog Blaze?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I also don't want to overmix my cookies. What I'm looking for is like fully incorporated, but just barely, right? So I'm not going to set the mixer and walk away. I'm just going to kind of pulse it until I'm happy. As long as I know it's not going to kick up, I can kick it on, take a little look. I know it kicked up. Something about the shape of these bowls, huh? And then I'm done, right? Fully mixed. I'm happy with that. We can get it off of our beater. Now, Hot Dog Blaze, what have we talked about with the creaming process? What is the most important thing we need to do?
Make sure it's all mixed.
Make sure it's all mixed. And how do we do that? What do I keep doing that's different from other recipes?
The ingredients.
The ingredients are different, but I also scrape it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to take and I'm going to scrape it because I need to make sure all the flour and all the chocolate's incorporated. This last step you could totally do by hand if you don't want to overwork it, because overworking anything activates all of that gluten that's in the wheat-based flour. And while we don't want to eat a tough cookie, we want to be a tough cookie because these are crazy times, right?
Yeah, just look at the sign.
Just like at the sign. Okay, so here's our cookie dough. Now, at this point, we have to start making decisions. Do I want to bake this now? Do I want to bake it tomorrow? Do I want to scoop it now? Do I want to put it in a bucket and freeze it like the Boy Scouts do? There's so many options. We have a dough, we know what it can do, but now we have to figure out how we're going to store it. So what I would recommend is, in an ideal world, you would scoop this now, right? I have a 2-ounce disher that will make approximately a 4-inch diameter cookie. So that breaks down to each ½ ounce is approximately 1 inch in diameter. It's very approximate because the baking cycle is different for each oven, each place. There's a whole bunch of variables in thermodynamics, right? Now, we can scoop this, put it on a tray, put that in a Ziploc bag and freeze it, and then you've got your cookies frozen so that if you gave up sweets for Lent, or if you're just not really ready today, or if plans have changed, you can scoop them out, put them in the freezer, freeze them, pull them out later, and bake them. If you're really, really talented, you can roll them into a tube, which is what we call kind of a torchon, and you can freeze that or chill it. Cut your cookies, just like you buy from Pillsbury in the chilled aisle section, and then you can bake them that way. Or, of course, because we're on Facebook Live, we're going to scoop them and bake them, right? Yeah? Alright, I'm going to show you how to scoop one, and then you're going to help me out. Okay, so here I have a sheet tray lined with parchment. I love parchment for cookies because it's very, very fast. It gives me a nice, very thin insulating barrier so that the bottom of the cookie doesn't get too hot while the top of the cookie does not. And I can pull the cookies right off there, go on with another batch, that way it's constant rotation in the oven. With a home oven, I'm really limited on space, so I have to make sure to get my cookies going quickly. Now, Hot Dog Blaze, pay attention. So I take my scoop, right, I push it up against the side, and then I need to do that 2 or 3 times to really make sure I'm getting all of that cookie dough in there, right? Now, you see, if I use the side of the bowl, it'll be slightly rounded. Is that super important? Maybe. Like, if we're at home, it's probably not the most important. If I'm in a hotel where it's extremely important that every single cookie weighs the exact amount, or at least as close as possible, then I'll scrape it against the top. Because the top is flat, but the inside of the bowl is rounded. Do you see the difference? It's crazy, right? like that little bit over time adds up to 2 or 3 more cookies. So you have to start making the decision. Do I want the bonus, or do I want to have a very tight control over what I'm doing? Then, here we go, Hot Dog Blaze. We take this, because it has our trigger, we scoop it, and we're done. Can you scoop these cookies for me, Hot Dog Blaze? Are you sure?
I'm sure.
Alright, so we're going to let Hot Dog Blaze scoop a couple cookies. This tray, with that size cookie, will only hold 6. So 6 4-inch cookies. That's not at all what I did. 6 4-inch cookies go on a half sheet tray, which will fit in most home ovens.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're not being clean, we're not being organized or anything. Hot Dog Blaze, how we doing, bud? Okay, you want to see me do it one more time?
No.
Okay, are you sure you don't want to see me do it one more time?
I'm sure.
I kind of want to see me do it one more time. Alright, so check it out. What you have in there is good, but we need to use the side of the bowl. So instead of scooping up and out, I'm actually scooping down and towards myself. Do you see how I'm doing that?
Yeah.
And then the side of the bowl shapes it for me. And again, if I'm worried about getting more yield, I scrape it flat on the top, scoop it out. Did you see the difference?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see you try. Remember, instead of scooping down and up like we would for ice cream or something, we're going to scoop down and towards ourselves so we get the friction of the bowl to give us a nice tight round of cookie dough. What questions are out there? Nothing yet? How long can we chill the dough? It is a lot of sugar if you wrap it very well. I'm laughing because Hot Dog Blaze is doing it all what I told him to, but it's funny. If it's wrapped really well, I would say 2 or 3 times in plastic wrap or Ziploc bags. It can be frozen. The technical answer is about a month. The real life answer is probably up to 6 months. As long as it doesn't freeze or burn and doesn't take on the smells of the freezer and whatever else is in there, it's fine. As it thaws, it shouldn't create any large ice crystals that when those melt turn into water and break the structure of the product. But it's one of those things that typically chocolate chip cookies are made to be used pretty quickly because people want to eat them pretty fast.
Like, how about you scooping it on, put it on?
Okay, yeah, I'll scoop and you can pull the trigger. How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that makes it more easier for me.
Yeah. So if we want half regular, as in chocolate chip, and half cookies with nuts, that's totally fine. I told you that we don't want to overwork the gluten, but if we come back now and wanted to add some pecans, some walnuts, some toasted coconut flakes, we put it in there, fold it really quickly, and then we'll be fine to go. Now, one of the questions is, glass versus a stainless steel bowl? Honestly, they're fine. We mix this pretty quickly. Sorry, Super Hot Dog Blaze, I took your job there. The glass today is primarily so you can see what's happening. The stainless steel is perfectly fine. I can tell you again, when I'm making 300 or 400 cookies at a time, I use a 20, 30, 40, 80 quart mixer. They are all stainless steel bowls. Why are mine flat like crackers? There are a lot of options that go into that. If your cookies come out super flat, I'm going to presume that it is too much sugar. Because what happens is sugar turns into a liquid as it melts. We've all seen it. Sugar also turns into a liquid in the presence of other liquids. So that's why I say you can't just add honey or random sugar to a recipe because you want to. I would assume it is because the sugar is too high and or the temperature is too cold. If you bake something too cold, the sugars melt faster than the proteins can coagulate. It continues to spread and spread and spread. By the time the proteins coagulate within the process, your sugar has reached a point that the diameter is massive, thus making it pretty flat. What do you think, Hot Dog Blaze? Looking good?
Yeah.
All right.
From the tip of my hot dogs, I can't really see anything except I believe you.
You believe me? Thanks, bud. I'm glad someone believes me. All right.
And there is more than 6 cookie dough allowed to go on the tray because there's still some space in the middle,
So Hot Dog Blaze says that we can put more than 6 of these cookies on the tray because there's a lot of space between them. But Hot Dog Blaze, these cookies are going to spread when they bake, so we need to make sure there's enough room for them to spread. Otherwise, they run into each other, and then somebody can walk in and say, oh, I want that cookie, and it's really 3 or 4 cookies all run together, right? So 6 of these size cookies. Now, one of the questions out there is, how does parchment change the baking time? It's pretty minuscule when it comes to parchment. If you bake on a dark sheet pan, the timing will all be pretty close together. We might see a minute or 2 difference, but that would kind of be absorbed in the theory of each oven being different. But what we'll see really is more of a difference in the shape of the cookies. If we bake directly on a dark sheet pan or something like tin foil, the heat transfer is so fast and so much more rapid that we'll get a more cakey cookie, which might lead to our next question, and it'll be something closer to like a muffin top, right? If we use a light colored pan with or without parchment, the heat transfer will be a little slower. If we want it to be the slowest that we can, creating the largest possible cookies that we can with this same recipe, we would then start using silicone mats, which change the thermodynamics quite a bit, right? So why are mine cakey? I would assume there's a good portion of it that is leavening. There may also be too much flour, and there may just be too much heat. What's up, Hot Dog Blaze?
You just took my job.
I know, buddy. You're so slow, no offense. You can't see over your costume. Your mustard gets in the way. Nobody wants mustard on their chocolate chip cookies.
Okay, so I'll put them on it.
Oh, weirdo. Alright, so before I answer the next question, we have our dozen 4-ish inch cookies. Of course, they're not that yet. Now, baking them at this shape will also lead them to be more cakey. It will also lead them to be more muffin domed instead of more flat. What I like to do is take a little bit of water on my hand, press the cookie, press it on the other side, create like a little crosshatch. And what I'm doing here is I'm taking something that's about 2.5 inches in diameter, and I'm just pressing it down halfway to where it's about 3.5 inches in diameter. So if you can see the difference here, I don't want to press it down too far, but I definitely help it out a little bit. Now I'm going to put this one in the oven. We're baking today at about 360 degrees Fahrenheit with convection. I always like to bake as fast as I can. If you do not have convection, 360 is still fine. With cookies and other things that are creamed, they're creamed because they have such a high fat content and they have a good flour and egg content that'll help fortify them once the fat and the sugars have melted. So what we're trying to do is we're melting both so it spreads, and then the coagulants, our flour starches, proteins, our egg starches and proteins, they'll coagulate and stop the spread and start a little bit of rise, right? So typically 360 is fine, whether you have convection or not. We'll just change how quickly they bake. If you are baking in a still oven, you will have a more even bake, which is to say that the cookie will have a more uniform texture throughout the surface. I like convection baking because it creates a crispier edge and a softer middle. I like the edges of my cookies to be super crispy, while the inside is kind of like barely set. Like my sugars have barely melted. It's almost like cooked dough and cookie dough in the middle. So, do I ever use a baking stone? For sure. If we use a baking stone, I don't have one here at the house, but the theory is that the baking stone will keep a more constant temperature and a more abrupt push of temperature as soon as we put it on there. So we put this on there, the heat would transfer from the stone into the pan. It would be a lot stronger than if it's just on the racks in there, and you would get faster heat transfer. My theory is that you will have softer cookies from it because they will also cook faster. You are also more likely, if you're not careful, to burn the bottom of your cookies before the top sets because a baking stone is direct heat. And it's very hard to transfer direct heat into radiant heat to cook all parts of the cookie at the same time. The question is out there, a silpat versus parchment. I like parchment for fat-based cookies because a silpat is great. It will definitely work, but again, it will create even more delay on your heat transfer. So your cookies will spread more and more and more, and then the grease on a cookie, kind of the fat that melts out and runs everywhere, that will build up on a silpat over time, whereas on parchment, it's paper. It will absorb a certain amount of that and it will bake off in the next cycle. I like parchment for fat-based cookies. Obviously, I use silpats all the time with my French macaroons, right? So, you can still bake with neither. I've also seen it baked on tin foil. You can use a tray with a thin layer of fat on it. You can spray it. You can use butter. You can use kind of those flour sprays that Pam and all those guys have. But hopefully that answers all the questions we have so far. Now, Hot Dog Blaze. We have our cookies in the oven. It's been about 3 minutes, I'm going to guess with my internal clock. For this size cookie at 360 degrees Fahrenheit with convection on the second rack in the oven, I'm going to bake them for about 6 minutes. Then I'm going to rotate the pan and I'm going to drop it down in the oven. That way it still has all of the heat on top of the cookie, but as we drop it into the oven for another 6 to 7 minutes. But my baking technique also includes letting it cool completely on the tray so that it absorbs all the heat from the tray when it comes out. If you don't want to wait for it, or you like a slightly more crispy cookie, I would bump up the baking time on each part to about 7 or 8 minutes. If you bake these cookies at this size for more than 20 minutes, something's wrong. If you're in a still oven, you might be right around 20 minutes, but I won't know. Each oven's obviously a little different. If you're doing it with convection and you're in the 20-minute range, something's wrong with the recipe somewhere. Okay? Now, Hot Dog Blaze, what questions do you have while we wait?
I don't have any.
You don't have any questions? Are you sure? Okay.
Actually, I do have one.
What is your question?
How does the batter form in the oven just depending on the heat to make the cookie?
What do you mean, how does it form in the oven?
So, like, if it doesn't really rise and we still have the batter and we don't want to eat the heated batter.
Okay. So Hot Dog Blaze is saying, how do we know that the dough is fully cooked, right? So how do we know that the dough is fully cooked? It should be crispy on the edge. It will obviously start taking a decent amount of color. And then we have to just trust that at some point the sugars have melted because of the time that they are in the oven. The eggs will coagulate. We're at 360 degrees Fahrenheit. Eggs coagulate at around 140. 165 degrees is of course the safe handling temperature by the food bodies that be and tell us what safety is. So if we're at 360 degrees Fahrenheit, they're in the oven for about 18 minutes. We just trust that they are safe to eat. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes we just gotta trust. Looks like we have a question coming in. Make Reed part of the show? No. For those of you who may not know, Reed is our 2-year-old. He is every bit of boy you could ever imagine. He likes to jump off the couch and run into walls and run up to lizards and do all the things that Blaze maybe doesn't like to do as much. The word I hear Reed say more than anything is outside, whereas Blaze says, no thanks. So making Reed part of the show, I just don't see that going well at all. I think it would be a food safety concern for everybody. But he's clearly our cheerleader, so we'll go from there. Now, I'm going to check our cookies and rotate them. I feel like we're pushing the 6-minute mark. You coming with me, Hot Dog Blaze?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Just to
Oh my goodness, look at those. They look great, but they have spread quite a bit. We are definitely at the 4 inches in diameter. Can you see why we can't fit more than 6 on a tray? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to set myself a timer.
One of them actually was really close together.
I know, one of them was touching another one. Now, the reason I'm keeping this video going, even though everything's in the oven, is because there's a couple tricks when they come out of the oven that we can also do to help them look all uniform and to kind of finish up that crispy edge that I keep talking about on the cookie. In my experience, that's more or less the holy grail of cookie baking, is that super crispy edge and a soft interior. And what we're going to do, I can kind of spoil it for you, is when they come out of the oven and they're still hot, we're going to take something that is the ideal diameter that I want. This is 4 inches. And I'm actually going to put it on top of my cookie, and I'm going to shape it by condensing the edges together. That makes me know that they're perfectly round. It will also push all of those re-gelatinizing sugars back together, and as they re-gelatinize, they'll make a super crispy edge, almost like a lace cookie. Now, obviously, they won't be a lace cookie, but you can see where I'm going. It'll be very crunchy, while the middle will still be very soft. It'll also give one of my favorite presentations of cookies, that little bit of ripple across the surface. Now, this starts getting into kind of the really romantic appearance of cookies, which I know most of you probably don't care, but I like my cookies to look a certain way because obviously I make so many. Hot Dog Blaze, what's your question?
It's not a question, except I was really kind of wondering about it.
What are you wondering about?
I just forgot.
You forgot the whole... Oh, you remembered. Okay.
When does the second joke start?
When does the second joke start? So obviously we plan jokes, so Hot Dog Blaze has something to say. So let's just cut ahead. Hey, Hot Dog Blaze, would you like to taste one of these cookies? Hold on, you have to look into the camera and deliver it.
Sure.
That's not the Okay, Hot Dog Blaze, let's try again. Hey, Hot Dog Blaze, do you want to taste one of these cookies?
I would relish it.
Oh,
Get it?
that's how it's done.
Get
Relish.
it? Relish.
Yeah, but do you see why you should look into the camera next time? Because it's okay. You'll get there, buddy.
Relish.
Acting's hard. So yeah.
Relish.
Are there no more questions out there? Nothing.
Wait, I got another question.
What is your question, Hot Dog Blaze?
How about we just let them see Reed for a little bit?
I don't think anyone needs to see Reed. He just woke up from his nap. He's feasting on some crackers. He's good. I think
Okay,
he's
then I'll take one of his crackers since I am a snack.
Okay. I think what we'll do to save everyone's sanity, including our own, is we'll go ahead and cut this. I'll just film a quick little video of me shaping the final bake. It'll be in 3 to 5 minutes, and we will go from there. Obviously, follow up with any questions. I will answer them on Facebook later. And thank you guys. We'll see you again tomorrow.